All right. Let's spend the last 10 minutes here talking about BrainDrive Concierge.
Yep.
Let's scope it out,
Okay.
right? What do we want it to do?
Now, see, here's okay. Mentally, I I don't know the right answer only because I know how LLMs can be with fine tuning. And the only way we're going to know is by doing it. So there's not, but working, if we can work off a CAG mentality where we just shove the documentation, depending on how much there is, of course, into the context window and answer questions based off that, we will probably get a particular detailed answer that we're looking for. The problem is how much documentation and then the context window side, especially since we want this to run on anything type thing. It's like we're not worried, somebody's not sitting there with 48 gigabytes of VRAM type situations. We could be dealing with a CPU and their regular RAM, so the size of that does matter. This is where, and then going by the fine tuning and the LoRa, uh, we leave it open to LLM's interpretation. But I think this is where a really good system prompt, basically like how Claude do it. I don't know if you've ever seen one of Claude's system prompts that they have.
Yeah.
It's like they're huge.
24,000 tokens or whatever.
Exactly. So we would do almost this something similar, not that long and like that, of trying to ensure and gatekeep that the LLM is supposed to be focused on BrainDrive. The answers are supposed to be regarding BrainDrive. As much help as we can give it without the user directing the prompt as much as possible. So if they type in what is BrainDrive, it should have the answer, it should know the answer, and it shouldn't imagine the answer, if that makes sense. Because that we get away from the hallucinations which can occur by putting as many guardrails as possible on that moment. But the only way we're going to know there is when we get it, it's fine tuned, and we start looking at that system prompt on what we can do to like we do with tell me a joke. We want to build a system prompt that so as much as possible, it will come up with a random joke every time, except for in this case, it will be brain drive information
Right.
where when you type in and it'll do its best to make sure it gives you information regarding brain drive. And hopefully if you get out of bounds on what your question is, it will direct you somewhere else.
Okay. So the core BrainDrive Concierge is
Yep.
going to be a model that comes with BrainDrive when you install it.
Yep.
And the idea is that it's your introduction to the core interaction. It's going to live on your system. It's your AI model once you install it, right?
Yep. Yes.
And it gets you to the core. You're going to open up, you're going to be on the chat page, and it's going to say, "Hi, I'm BrainDrive Concierge. Welcome to your BrainDrive. I'm here to help you get started,"
Yep.
right? Here are a few things that people often like to do. Let me know if you'd like me to walk you through how to do these or if there's something else that you're interested in. You can
Correct.
ask me anything about BrainDrive, right?
Correct.
Something
Yes.
along those lines, okay?
Yes.
And then we want the BrainDrive Concierge. If people are like, what the hell is this, right? It should respond
Yep.
with what it is, right? And we have the
Yes.
documentation for that, right? We have a
Yes.
lot of our core, this is our core documentation that we've been working on, how we talk about BrainDrive, the mission, the pillars, all that stuff,
Yep.
right?
And any response it gives you, it should also tell you at the end of it, for additional information, go here.
Right. Okay. Which can be the forum or the GitHub or
Yep.
whatever, depending on what the question is.
Yep.
Okay. So it directs you to where you can learn more or what the source of
Yep.
that question is, blah, blah, blah.
And
Okay.
that goes into the system prompt, not necessarily the training part.
Okay, but yeah, before we get into that piece, let's first talk about the what, and then we'll talk about the how.
Yeah.
Okay, and then this should be able to answer questions for BrainDrive owners who are just like, "What is this, and how
Yep.
do I use it?"
Yep.
Right? It should answer questions for BrainDrive builders.
Mm-hmm.
How do I build on top of
Yep.
this? Right? So plugin studio, all of that. And it should answer questions for BrainDrive entrepreneurs, like about the marketplace and all how all that
Correct.
works eventually,
Correct.
right?
And these will be high level answers, not necessarily nuts and bolts answers.
Well, I think for the marketplace, yes, but for like how do I build a plugin, it should tell you, right?
Well, yeah, true. I don't want to get it to the point, but it can't because of the sub model size we'll be dealing with. It can't get to the point where it's like, hey, create me a React plugin that does
No,
X, Y,
yeah,
Z. That's what I'm saying. High level though, how do I build a plugin? Well, you need to build a React plugin. You'll need to we can get even the basics of, hey, this is how you'd set up a small environment to do so, but that actual code would be beyond its scope.
great. Okay, I understand. So,
Yep,
and also maybe since it's a 1 billion model, maybe it just gives the high level. It's like these are React, here's how it's designed to work, and here's a user guide, here's our
yep,
documentation on how to do it.
exactly.
Okay, all right, great.
That's why I was saying high level, not low level.
So there will be a RAG component of this then.
There could be at some point.
Well,
We could
how's it
get
going
there.
to know where to point, like the link to the guide and all that?
Oh, well, that comes from training because to train when you're doing training, you could tell it that if you're asking questions versus XYZ, this is the link to that. And that's why sometimes you see links. They're not necessarily put in anymore, but they used to be put in for training. Since we're very specific in what our goal is and where we're directing people, that link can be part of training.
Okay,
Also,
so
system prompts that we can get into of, hey, if you ask X, Y, Z, always provide this
okay,
links.
so we have the way that we now the how.
Yep,
Also the last thing is if it doesn't know how to answer the question, it should send you to the support forum and
yep,
open up a support ticket. Blah blah blah.
yep,
Right? Okay. So that now the how,
yep,
right? So we have what to work with. We have the system prompt,
yep,
which is a big deal, right?
yes, yes,
And then we have the documentation and et cetera that we're probably not going to be able to have a RAG system on because it's going to be installing with BrainDrive and we'd have to do all the RAG stuff, which is
yep,
not part of the core system. So whatever, documentation it's pointing to and it's trained on is going to have to be fine tuned into the model, right?
correct, correct. And
So we're going to have to yeah, go ahead.
we could potentially skirt around that a little bit. We could introduce a little CAG into it. And that's if, like, let's say there's a little drop down, almost like if you're doing a support ticket. Your question is related towards plugins. And so that we limit the documentation that's going to try to put in CAG into the context window. If you select plugins, it will take a little piece of information it has on plugins. It will introduce that into the context window, and then the AI or the LLM would be able to combine both the context window information, what it's been fine tuned on, and then the system.
And
And
where is that context window injection coming from?
that would be in the back end.
So we will be able to include some documentation in the back end.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. It won't be a RAG, though, not a full fledged RAG. It'll just be used to help flesh out the context window because we'll be dealing with a model that'll probably have upwards of probably 32K of context window, maybe more, depending on which model architecture is selected. And so, and we're not dealing with an instance where we have to worry about very long conversations. So let's use the context window to give better short responses.
Okay. So we will be able to include some
Yep.
documentation in the back end, and we'll be able to update that documentation
Do
as
the
we
normal
update the
update. Yep.
system.
Yes.
So basically, how should we think about the system prompt versus the fine tuning versus the CAG?
Yes. That's
That's
what.
that's the whole
Oh, that's the
question.
question. Yeah. No. Okay. Yes. Okay. Well, first of all, of course, we're getting the documentation put together, work in progress, and all like that.
Right.
We will need to categorize it because, like I said, when that window shows up for them to ask the concierge, they should have the availability to select a drop down, just so they can isolate the CAG better. Um,
Say that one. Sorry, say that one
well,
more time.
a support ticket. If you were to do a support ticket, you generally pick what department this is going towards. We would almost do the same thing for for the concierge as well. Select from the drop down what you're going for. Now we could try to get fancy, but I think initially the best course of action is just one drop down, and we'll worry about getting fancy later.
Can we have the drop down be the initial message? It's like, "Hi, this is BrainDrive Concierge. I'm here to help you
Yep.
with one of any of these five things. What would you like to get started with? Number one."
Um, I'm not going to say no. I have to think on that, how to incorporate that into the
Yeah.
UI.
Because I don't, the more this can be a chat
Yes.
and
No, no,
not
no.
like a drop
Yep.
down.
Yep. Oh, yeah. We might, okay. Now with the system prompt, we might be able to go about it a little differently. The first question is, hey, what do you want to talk about? Select from this list. And then now we've isolated, we know what we're talking about. And then it can load the right information and move forward with whatever the question was. And then it'll combine the CAG into the context window, and then the LLM being fine tuned on the information, and then come up with the correct
And
results.
how should we think of, so from my experience, we don't want to fine tuning should be facts, basically, right?
Yes. Yep.
So what's our mission? That's not going to change.
Yep.
To make it easy to build, control, and benefit from your own AI system, right?
Yes.
That can be fine tuned into the system
But that's why
because,
we're if we stay at the high level, that's not going to change much. The fact that we're using React, and this is how we're doing plugins, we might change some functionality bottom line and all like that, but that's what the documentation's for online. The fact that we're using React, if we change from that, we're going to be doing everything different anyways.
yep. Okay. Um, cool. So, great. This should be a great video for him to look at. And I can post this on the forum as well, and we
Yep.
can start some interactions there. All right.